President Trump is going to make decisions about policy in his administration if he wins. Project 2025 is something that's going to transcend the next 4 years, the next 10 years. It really is, for the first time in the history of the conservative movement, the apparatus for policy and personnel. That's the most important thing to remember.
I have one follow-up. It's just that you have said that this plan is about institutionalizing Trumpism. So, because I also know you all, not just the president of the Heritage Foundation, you're also president of the Heritage Action, which is the political action committee. And so, is it tied to Trump or not?
I said the context for that comment to the New York Times was that the work of the Heritage Foundation was to institutionalize Trumpism. Trumpism as a new version of conservatism, a conservatism that recognizes that by every objective measure, the United States is weaker in 2024 than it was in 1984. We also happen to think that's reversible, by the way. We're ultimately optimists. And by institutionalizing Trumpism, what we're saying is that even though we are known as Ronald Reagan's think tank, I'm a son of the Reagan Revolution, I'm very proud of that, that's 40 years ago, and we need to understand what time it is in America. And right now, Donald Trump, whether someone likes it or not, I happen to like it, is the standard bearer for conservatism.
Not enough Americans are aware of the Heritage Foundation's plans to help Trump expand presidential power and suppress the rights of most Americans with their Project 2025 transition plan. So, the president of the foundation and Political Action Committee went on MSNBC to make sure we knew that they have no shame in saying that they plan to rebuild our democracy in the image of one guy.
I want to get to the nub of this, because you can't really do anything until you remove what has been identified as the problem, and that is 50,000 federal employees. Axios noted, quote, the massive headhunting quest aims to recruit 20,000 people to serve in the next administration as a down payment on 4,000 presidential appointments plus potential replacements for as many as 50,000 federal workers who are policy adjacent, as Trumpers put it. Policy adjacent to what? I mean, you're talking about people who've been in federal government. My daddy was a federal government employee, so I would be really appalled thinking that he could be on someone's chopping block because they think he is part of some deep state effort. Talk to us about what that looks like. If Heritage is calling for removing 50,000 federal employees, who are you replacing them with?
Since Michael Steele is a Republican, actually the former RNC chair, he's got direct knowledge of the party's pre-Trump goals to implement more conservative policies in the country. And as he's seen the party aggressively dispose of Republicans that aren't on board with endorsing a Trump dictatorship, he can see that their talk of ridding the federal government of the deep state is just more projection, because their plan is to blatantly fill the government with a MAGA deep state, solely dedicated to Trump. So let's see Kevin Roberts' answer.
I suspect a lot of those people you're talking about have been in the federal service for a long time and have served not just Republican administrations, but also Democratic administrations, et cetera.
They have, and 95% of them who give political contributions give them to the Democratic Party. I reject out of hand, Michael, that somehow
you're going to fire someone because they wrote a check to a Democratic candidate?
No, we're going to fire someone, and the number needs to be more than 50,000, considering that there are more than 2 million federal employees, because over the last century, the radical left has seen the administrative state as the fourth branch of government. They're unelected bureaucrats. Nothing against your dad, obviously, as a human being. You know that about me and Heritage. But ultimately, we have to devolve power from the imperial city of Washington back to the people.
Because he wrote a check to a Democratic candidate without any appreciation or understanding where his political allegiance
we
or
will dramatically reform agencies that take rights away from people.
Why does that matter?
They're doing their job about a mission that's misaligned.
A mission that's misaligned, he says, to what Trump and his authoritarian partners want. So despite the fact that Republican administrations and legislators come into power all the time, cut taxes for the richest at the expense of regular Americans, and implement social policies that push the country to the right, that's not good enough. They're applying a highly partisan litmus test for every federal employee to only support MAGA conservatism, which is designed to be the standard, no matter who's in office, making the implementation of opposing political views obsolete, no matter how much the majority of the country supports it. In other words, institutionalizing Trumpism, the guy that says he wants to be a vengeful dictator.
For example, the U.S. Department of Education. Thankfully, President Trump deserves credit for saying that he wants to end the Department of Education. That means that employees in that agency, even if they've been serving that mission with great competence, will have to go look for another job. What's more important than that, Michael, is that we actually have a delivery mechanism for education in this country that reflects the 21st century. So at Heritage, we see this a very different way. You want to look at it from the lens of unelected bureaucrats, most of whom, not your dad, I guess, who want to say that they are more important than the everyday American. We want to look at it from the standpoint of the everyday American and say it's time that they are put in the driver's seat rather than unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, but they aren't going to be in the driver's seat because they aren't going to be doing the jobs. The folks you're identifying who are Trump aligned are the ones who are going to be coming in.
You are positing that those people are incompetent.
Notice how flippantly they talk about eliminating the Department of Education and replacing it with an unnamed MAGA version that Americans just have to trust serves the needs of their children. And they launder that startling admission with more projection, that installing strategic loyalists to a radical political movement based on one man's authority somehow puts power into the hands of the people that he's openly said he wants to control. And since their objectives fly in the face of a majority of Americans, losing is something that they've prepared for, and using the same strategy that they tried in 2020.
I actually, Dr. Roberts, have a question about this upcoming election. Is your organization going to accept the results of the 2024 presidential election?
I believe that Dr. Roberts can't hear. So Alicia just asked, is your organization going to accept the results of the 2024 election, regardless of the outcome?
Yes, if there isn't massive fraud like there was in 2020.
What does that mean?
If there isn't massive fraud.
Do you believe that there was not massive fraud?
There was massive fraud. We have an election fraud database that has documented that over years.
In other words, if we win, there's no fraud. And if we lose, there's massive fraud. The only people they need to convince of this clownish conclusion is their radical base that doesn't see the hypocrisy in it or the extreme proof that Trump lost. Proof that includes even the Heritage Foundation's findings that fraud has been incredibly small. So small that it dismantles their own argument.
I believe, according to the Heritage Foundation, sir, by your count, Heritage Foundation has done an investigation, and according to your count, there have been 1,513 proven instances of voter fraud across the United States since 1982.
Yeah, that's probably 1,513. Because they're very hard to document. And the Democrat Party is very good at fraud.
You see, if you ask enough questions to people that peddle alternative facts, they'll eventually come down to simplistic conclusions like, we don't have the proof because our enemies are so good at hiding it, when it's blatantly obvious that they simply don't have any evidence to back up their manipulative statements. So we just move on from them refusing to accept representative elections to the authoritarian actions that they'll carry out on people that they deem inferior.
I'm specifically interested as it relates, Dr. Roberts, to the deportation of immigrants in this country, just understanding sort of how it is going to work. When we talk about folks on the interior, how you see a future administration utilizing the National Guard, ICE, police forces to deport something like 11 million people.
Well, first of all, we need to close the border. And secondly, we need to have the biggest mass deportation system ever in the history of America, because it is unjust and illegal and evil that more than 10 million illegal aliens have come to this country. It's imperative that we send those people back, invite them back to come through the legal system. We love immigrants at Heritage, but we also love the rule of law.
So how do you plan to carry that out?
Well,
are you talking about going door to door? Because that's what I could read from the plan, but I think
the first thing is that there's going to be a lot of self-deportation. The interesting thing, as you no doubt know, is that simply talking about this and beginning to implement a plan, and President Trump deserves a lot of credit for talking about this, causes people to say, I don't want to run the risk of being arrested for doing something illegal. But secondly, there are great plans using the Department of Homeland Security to return these people back to south of the border.
So they openly admit that the plan is to militarize for mass deportations of people that they consider illegal. And our history for doing things like that come with brutality and wrongfully deporting American citizens based on some bigoted standards. It's the reason why policies like stop and frisk and general law enforcement profiling doesn't work. It's based on bigoted beliefs of those in power. Beliefs that make sure to paint an entire group of people as dangerous.
Dana White, did anyone ever hear of Dana White? He's a legend, right? UFC, ultimate fighter, ultimate fighting. And he's a fantastic man. I said, Dana, I have an idea. Why don't you set up a migrant league of fighters and have your regular league of fighters And then you have the champion of your league. These are the greatest fighters in the world. Fight the champion of the migrants. I think the migrant guy might win. That's how tough they are. He didn't like that idea too much, but actually, it's not the worst idea I've ever had. No, it's these are tough people. These people are tough, and they're nasty, mean.
Just gloss over the fact that the guy that wants to be president again actually floated the idea to have migrant fights because it'd be entertaining to rich folks to watch and dehumanize people that they consider inferior to them. And before MAGA folks claim that he never actually pitched the idea to Dana White, they should fire up their standard backup excuse, that he was just making some more racist jokes.
Did Donald Trump ask you to make a migrant fighting league?
It's a joke, yeah.
He said it wasn't his. He said he didn't think it was his worst idea ever, but you weren't into it.
No, it was a joke. It was a joke. I saw everybody going crazy online. But yeah, he did say it.
It's just a joke. What's the big deal? Just like his humorous idea to shoot American protesters in the streets of Washington, D.C., or his laughable plan to drop a nuke into the eye of a hurricane. And maybe the hilarious thought to declare martial law and use the military to redo the election in states that he lost before opting to then deploy his violent street army onto the Capitol. But back to the revealing answer from Heritage's Kevin Roberts here, who has another huge group of people that they're hell-bent on strong-arming into compliance.
In Louisiana, in places all over this country, abortion care is unavailable to people that may need it. You and the organization in this plan talks about changing the Department of Health and Human Services to the Department of Life. Do you think that women in America should be able to get an abortion if that is what their doctor says they need?
Abortion's not health care. I find it really interesting, if not worse, that you wouldn't support the change of the department name to the Department of Life. I thought we were all in support of life. We believe eminently in women's rights, and particularly women's rights in the womb. And so the real question that you should be asking
I just want to know, if I may, though, because I do ask the questions here.
Why aren't we talking about the people
I just
who
want to
are
know, do you
supporting
believe
legislation that abortion can happen until 3 days after the person's born? This is an absurd framing by this network.
That is an absurd assertion. As a person with an actual womb, I'm telling you that does not happen.
So
but let me just back up.
Legislators in California, Virginia, New York, who
Dr.
actually
Roberts,
filed those bills.
Does Heritage and Project 2025 believe that a woman should be able to have an abortion if her doctor says that she needs one? It's a yes or no question.
Abortion is not health care.
So
Abortion
that is
is
a
the
no?
murder of a human being.